Okay, so my talk title today is Breaking the Mold. And it comes from a memory that I had about a job that I once had when I lived in Hawaii. Had a wonderful time there, and I worked at two art galleries. The first I worked at was a small local gallery right there in the little city of Kona, Kailua Kona, and it was called Collector's Fine Art Gallery. It was very nice, a beautiful place, and I learned a lot about it. I signed on there as the shipper, the person who packed everything together to ship back to the mainland. People would buy something there in the gallery, and I would ship it back for them. Well, that gallery, I don't remember exactly what happened, but anyway, we parted ways for some reason. It was very amicable, but we parted ways, and I think I was asked to take another job, is what it was. And so I got this job working out on the coastline at this resort that was very, very beautiful, and they had just opened a new gallery there called the Dianson Art Gallery. And they carried a line of statuettes by this Russian artist who went by the acronym ERTE, which is RT, ERTE in Russian. And his real name was Roman Tirtov. You have seen his work all over the world. He actually, at one time, started as a person who was an illustrator for Vogue magazine way back in the 30s and 40s. And he would have these beautiful women dressed like what today we would call Cher, dressed like Cher with big, heavy headdresses on and so forth, and big draped gowns, you know, these beautiful poses. And that was the covers for the old Vogue magazines way back when. Well, people liked them so well that they said, you know, I'd like to have this. So he actually started becoming a commercial artist. And one of the things that he did was take these images and make them into 3 dimensions and create statuettes that people had in their homes in the Art Deco period. Very beautiful. Very nice, and you still see them all the time. Sort of Great Gatsby looking time. So I learned a lot about how these were made. The way they were made was what's called the lost wax process. Many of you may already know what that is. The artist makes a rendering of a statue in wax first. And then a mold is pressed around it usually out of something like plaster of Paris or some kind of cement. And this is done. And then a little tiny hole is left in this, and it's inverted. And then bronze is poured into this mold. And of course the bronze melts the wax, and the wax runs out the hole. And then they plug the hole up when there's no more wax coming out, and they wait for that to harden. And then very carefully, they cut around the edge of it and pull the 2 pieces of the mold apart. And what's left is this rendering, and now they have a mold that they can use over and over and over as many times as they wish. It's called the lost wax method because obviously the wax of the first rendering is gone. It still requires a lot of art to be able to create this, and then lots of fine finishing is done on each one of these. But they break that open and they put it back together and pour another one, and break that open and put it back together and pour another one, until finally the image starts losing its quality. It starts getting a little blurry in the eyes and the features and so forth, and it starts losing its quality. When that occurs, usually after about 100 or so of these, then they break the mold. The mold is finished. So, and then of course that makes it even more valuable because there's only a certain number in that run. And so, you know, there may be like 100, or there may be 99, or 80, or whatever it might be. And so if you buy number 1 of 80 of one of these, then that's ideal. But if you still get number 79 of 80, you're getting a great piece of artwork. And people do this for any number of artistic endeavors. In bronze, that's the way it's done. There are other ways of doing this, of course. There are many ways, but this molding way is really something, because that's kind of the way we have done in our own lives, in our own minds. Jesus uses an example of that when a young man comes to him and says, "Master, I would like to follow you, but first I must bury my father." Jesus turns to him and says something that seems so strange. It seems almost cruel. And you know what it is that he says, right? He turns to him and says, "Let the dead bury the dead." Wow, what a remark to say. Let the dead bury the dead. If you take that on its face value, Jesus has basically insulted this person and his entire family by saying, "Let the dead bury the dead." But what he is trying to say fits in with what I'm talking about this morning, if you really look at it again. Jesus is saying, break that mold. Break out of that. Follow this and gain true life, gain joy by being able to break away from a tradition that isn't necessary to get to where I'm at. If you want to be, follow me, and so forth. Don't tell me, but first I must do this. Let that be handled by those who are going to stay there, going to stay in that mold. Break that mold and come with me right now. How many of us in our own lives say to ourselves, "Well, I'm going to do that someday, but first I've got to do this"? How many of us believe that there is a way that we just are, or a way that our family just is, or a way that our country is just the way it is? I had a significant other at one time whose favorite phrase, it seemed like, was she'd stand there with her hand on her hip and say, "Terry, that's just not done." Because she had a mold and that she lived inside. And everything had to be a certain way. And I, being sort of a scatterbrained, eclectic, artistic, idea-thinking person, often did things a little differently. I wasn't a conventional thinker or a conventional doer. And to her, it was just more than she could bear sometimes to be with me and be around me. And so there were a lot of times I had to go by myself because she didn't want to appear to be a part of a duo with this guy dressing that way or acting that way. Was she the one that was in the right? Yeah, sometimes she was. Sometimes she was, because sometimes there are conventional ways of doing things that are necessary for us to get along, to get to a higher echelon in our lives, and to be viewed a certain way by the rest of the world. Other times, it's more appropriate to have this idea of, that's a mold that I don't fit in and never did fit in very well, and I'm going to break that. I'm going to allow that to be broken. Think a minute about the way that you have done your life up to now, or done in different stages in your life up to a certain point. Maybe you were in a relationship where someone is saying to you, this is the way you do it. This is the way it must be. This is the way it is. This is the way I want it to be. This is the way it's always been. This is the way we do things. This is the kind of thoughts that we have This is the kind of languaging that we use. And it just made you feel like you were trapped inside of a mold that you couldn't break out of, and you didn't really fit in very well. You needed to break that mold in order to do that, to gain freedom in your own life and to be fully expressive. I think probably every one of us have had that feeling at one time or another, where the shoe was just too tight because it wasn't our shoe. The shoe was just too tight because we had outgrown. We needed to break the mold and move on. I know for every one of us, there comes a time in our spiritual life, not just in the practicalities of everyday times, where we feel like, been there, done that. It's just, aren't we doing the same thing over and over? I'm not growing. And yet the urge is there to grow. The urge is there, but we don't want to break out quite yet. You know, there's a wonderful saying that is said by the Chinese. They say, isn't it amazing that when an egg is broken from the outside, life ends. But when an egg is broken from the inside, life begins. This is that mold I'm talking about. You know, what must it be for a caterpillar to go through its process and say to itself, if it has this kind of awareness, imagine yourself to be a caterpillar. What's happening to me? My life is changing all around me. I have this urge suddenly to just wrap myself up, and I don't know what's causing it. It's doing it to me. And suddenly you find yourself totally wrapped up and trapped in a situation that will no longer allow you to be what you once were. But in the resting time that occurs while you're trying to figure out what's going on, a wonderful change occurs. And when the time comes to emerge, you come out no longer as a caterpillar. Do you think a butterfly grieves the loss of being a caterpillar? I've often wondered that, because that's the kind of thoughts I have. I know that in some circles that's just not done, but that's the kind of thoughts that I have sometimes. Does a butterfly grieve its caterpillarness, or does it glory in its butterflyness? So look at your life now. All the thoughts and feelings and emotional charge that you have put in going into this mold to burn away all that was unnecessary in your life, that wax image, in order to become this bronze, beautiful creature that you are now, this statue. Three-dimensional as we all are. We went from a spirit, sort of just a liquid kind of thing, came into this world, and then we formed this idea and image of self. When the mold was opened, there we were. And I think for every one of us, we thought, much as the caterpillar thought, that this is the way we would be forever. But if you're anything like I am, and you are, you're just tootling along in life and you glance over in the mirror and you say, who is that? Life changes on the outer, life changes on the inner. You look back at memories that you've had in your life and you ask yourself, why did I come to that decision? Why did I do that? How foolish that was, or how brave that was, whatever it might have been. We look at our own lives always in retrospect. Many of us, many times, have broken molds. It's only natural, and it's only normal, and it's only the best thing that can occur for us, is to allow those molds to break. Yes, it's painful at times to say to ourselves, I'm not going to be the same anymore. Something is changing inside of me so deeply that I have no control over it. It's an urging of spirit that is allowing me to break this old mold, to let the dead bury the dead, and to move on into a higher form of life, a higher realization of consciousness. For each and every one of us, we've got a little holiday coming up here. It's where we celebrate the Declaration of Independence coming up. And I'll be talking about that. The Declaration of Independence. That was a breaking of a mold. It was a breaking of a way of life, a conventionality that seemed like the only way that could be done. For others left this country and went back to the old motherland because the things that were occurring here on this plane just weren't done. But they were done. So now we see new things occurring in life that's causing all sorts of birth pangs and chaos, breaking of molds, breaking away, doing things in a different way, and our first reaction is, oh my gosh, it's coming to an end. It appears to be breaking from the outside. It appears to be like the eggshell that is being broken from the outside. And in a sense it is. But it's also something from within that is breaking forth. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. We're not sure. The whole world right now is not sure what it's going to look like. But I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's just a breaking of a mold. It's a time to break some old molds and see some new creatures, new visions being formed. It's a way to look at life differently than we once did, knowing that Spirit is in charge. It's another chance for us to see Spirit in charge. It's another chance. It's another opportunity to once again validate that Spirit is always in charge. So do that. Break the molds in your life that are constraining you. Give yourself a chance to grow into a greater person, greater than you are now. To be able to see yourself in a way that you weren't able to see yourself before. Knowing that it's all okay. It's all going to be okay. Go ahead and allow yourself to